Hello, I'd like to thank you for tuning in and watching our presentation for town meeting on the Norwood Public Schools FY22 budget. I'm David Thompson, I'm the superintendent of schools.
And I'm Maya Bodenhofer. I am the vice chair of the Norwood School Committee, and I'm a member of the budget subcommittee.
Okay, so first we want to start off, we want to say thank you to town meeting and to the town of Norwood. Your support last fall with the extra money we needed was so important with allowing us to offer synchronous learning for all of our students in the remote and hybrid model. The state mid-year increased the requirements for live instruction, and because of your support and how we planned in the beginning, we not only exceeded that, we almost doubled that minimum requirement for time on learning. So this has been a challenging year. Since we opened in September, the district has never had to pivot an entire school back to full remote, and part of that was your support and help in that.
So we want to talk about the override. It's as we start to think about the budget, we want to remember our override pledge and check in about where we're at with regard to our operational override. FY22 is the third year of the override, and as you'll recall, the pledge included two major promises. One was a 3.5% budget increase cap, and we are honoring that this year. And the other was a limit on the increase in the number of benefited positions. So other than mandated positions, we promised to add no more than 5 new benefited positions per year, and this year we will be adding 3. I want to make it clear that Norwood is still on track to make the override last at least 5 years. The town budget this year includes additional contributions to the override stabilization fund, so we're doing well in that respect.
So looking at the overall improvements due to the override, one of the things we were asking for was money to refresh the curriculum. So this year we implemented a new English language arts curriculum. It was launched in September for grades K through 5. Piloting has been a little delayed due to the COVID learning model challenge, but extra money is going to be put into FY22 budget to start to catch up. We also talked about increasing our requirements and options for high school so that we could meet Mass Core, and I'm pleased to announce that the school committee voted in March, starting with the class of 2025, to increase the graduation requirements, and we will be fully in line with Mass Core. The other thing we wanted to do is we wanted to include art classes for our kindergarten students. This past year we had art every other week, and we will be increasing our FTEs in art so that we'll be able to offer art to our kindergarten every single week. Our Chromebook initiative continues. Actually, it was kind of on super drive this year, but we do have ongoing funding in this year's upcoming year's budget to continue refreshing and replacing those as we move forward, as well as offering high quality professional development for staff. We have the Highlander Institute coming in to work with equity and diversity, World Savvy, which is a cultural competency type curriculum, and culturally responsive teaching practices, and we're going to continue our work with the Universal Design for Learning, which increases access for all of our students in the regular ed classroom setting. Also, we are continuing with our student intervention system. We are in the second year of using Renaissance assessment to establish and measure how our students are doing, and be able and enable our students, our teachers, to focus on curriculum that will bring students up to speed. Also, we continue to add to our social emotional learning programming. The Second Step program has continued to come out with new modules, especially in these challenging COVID times, and we continue to add those to our program, as well as training for our staff. In our 5-year strategic plan, FY22 will represent our third year of the 5-year plan. And again, the 5 main strategic objectives are investment in resources allocation, facilities and operation, innovation, instruction, and personalized learning. The 4th is programs and pathways, and the 5th are safe and supportive schools. This year's budget is coming in at a 3.5% increase, in line with the override pledge, and has a grand total of $49,628,771. The goals for this budget, increasing instructional technology support, which falls under Objective 2. Our curriculum refresh, which falls under Objective 3. We are going to be implementing a refresh of our elementary math program. It will be similar. It's a new version of what we have used in the past. We'll also be looking at 6 to 12 science and tech engineering materials. More elective options at Norwood High School, and those are Objectives 3 and 4 with our strategic plan, and additional attention to student needs through targeted interventions. Again, Renaissance is a huge tool in that effort, and also addressing educational skill and content gaps, as well as the social emotional needs of our students. Other goals for our budget: effective use of grants and revolving funds, which is Objective 1. Professional development, which fall under Objectives 1, 3, and 5, specifically diversity and equity and inclusion. Technology and project-based learning, and improvements in our finance, payroll, and administration. Increased staffing and assessments for students with disabilities. We continue to work on that, as well as increased instructional support for our English language learners. As you can see, our ELL and SPED populations continue to be high. They are gradually increasing as time goes on, and we're going to continue to work to meet the needs of these students and keep them in the regular classrooms as much as possible. So looking at staffing for our mandates, which come under special education and ELL, we do need to add 3 special ed teachers, and that is because of increasing enrollment, and 1 adjustment counselor at the high school. We do have a social emotional program at the high school, and we need to support that as it is growing. We do need to add 1 English language learner teacher. Again, those populations are increasing. It's not always just the numbers, it's also the needs. You can have a slight increase of numbers, but a big increase in need. Other needs, and this comes under the other pieces that we are adding, an administrative assistant and registrar, NHS teachers, and that 1.2 actually represents increasing part-time people that we have, and not an increase holistically in benefited positions or those that would require adding healthcare and that sort of thing. Increasing our career counselor by 0.2, and again, that kindergarten art by 0.4. And the instructional tech specialist is actually a position we added with the need to go to hybrid learning. That has been a huge benefit. Thank you, Laura Mullen, for all of your work this year in helping our teachers grapple and learn all the new technology. So if you look, that's a total of 3.8 and actually 3 benefited positions that we're adding.
So the next slide calls out the budget by the DESE function codes. DESE is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and they have specific reporting requirements. What I want you to note is that this bottom line budget, the $49.6 million, is actually a little bit less than what you would see in the budget book last year. But the reason that number is down is because the facilities has moved out of our budget and into a new budget for the townwide facilities department. So if we just compare last year's budget without facilities to this year's budget, that is that 3.5% increase that you see. In the next slide, our business manager, Karen Sheridan, has done some analysis and shown the budget by these DESE categories. You'll note that instructional services takes up almost 80% of the budget, and leadership and administration is only 2.5% of the budget. On the next slide, we looked at it in another way. It's grouped by major categories, and you can see that salaries represent 83% of the budget. As you know, schools are a people business, and so most of our expenses go to salaries. The next slide shows that we don't just rely on the appropriation from town meeting to fund our schools. There are also other offsets that are used in the budget. The largest one is the special education circuit breaker. This is money from the state that helps to offset our costs for out-of-district tuition. And this year we are anticipating $2.75 million in circuit breaker offset. And we also have some money that we collect from various student fees for bus fees, the tuition for model students in our preschool program, and fees for athletics and fine arts. The next slide shows some of the state and federal grants that we get that support our schools. Most of these are ongoing grants that we can count on year to year, things like Title I, Title IIA, Title III. Those are things that come in every year. We are anticipating $1.7 million for next year. And then the next slide shows some special funds that are just COVID related. As you know, COVID has put a huge burden on towns and schools, and so both the federal government and the state government have offered some grants, and so this year these funds have come in, but they don't have to be spent just this year. Some of these are designed so that they can be spent over multiple years, but that's another $2.5 million in funding that the schools are able to take advantage of. And we use that to offset some of the other things that would normally be in the appropriation.
So the other news out of the school department is our work on developing and hopefully getting approval for a new middle school project. The middle school building committee and the school committee will soon make decisions around the grade configuration, be it either a 5 through 8 or a 6 through 8 middle school, the site and footprint of a new school. There have been recent public forums and they are available on NCM the past March 18th, April 29th. And then upcoming in May on the 19th at 7 p.m. is another public forum. And of course, you can get more information by going to the new cmsproject.org website to get all of this information as well as view the videos.
So thank you very much. That concludes our presentation about the annual budget. And now we'd like to talk about the special town meeting articles that we will be bringing before town meeting. Article 1 has to do with special education vehicles. And this slide shows the age and mileage of the entire fleet of our special education vehicles. You'll note that the red lines indicate an urgent need for replacement. So the next slide shows our actual requests. This year, our request is 4 vans that are in need of replacement. The average age of those vans that will be replaced is 11 years, and the average miles is over 135,000 miles on those vehicles. We will be replacing them with 3 standard vans and 1 wheelchair van. We're also looking to add 1 minibus to the fleet. Currently, all our small buses are in service, and if a bus becomes unavailable due to mechanical issues, it takes 3 vans to replace it. So we want to make sure that we have a little bit of a backup for some of these bus needs. The total cost is $231,000. And I think it's important on the next slide we talk about the efficiency of the special education transportation program. We really think it's worthwhile to invest in this program because it does overall save the district money. The current cost to outsource transportation is $225 per day per student. So that works out to more than $40,000 a year. If we do the transportation in-house, do it ourselves, that costs us about $118,000 per day per van. But some of our routes have multiple students on the van, and so we can really save money there when we can do that. So overall, Norwood Public Schools has eliminated over $200,000 in annual outsourcing costs by bringing all of our special education transportation in-house. The next article we would like to talk about is Article 2 and our request for some IT equipment. We would need to replace 3 network switches at Norwood High School, including the core switch. The existing switches are 10 years old. We're also looking to replace 25 wireless access points in various elementary schools. These existing access points are 7 years old and are approaching end of life for support. So the total cost for that, or the request right now, is for $72,000. And we want to note that we do a lot on cost efficiency. Norwood benefits from the E-rate program, which is described on the next slide. The district is able to participate in this program because of the number of students that we have who are eligible for free and reduced lunch. So both the switches and the wireless access points are eligible for reimbursement. And so we receive a 60% discount on regular pricing for all equipment that we purchase through E-rate.
Okay, so I'm going to speak to the next special town meeting article, Article 7, which has to do with long-term contracts. And both the schools and the general government are looking for this from town meeting to get permission to vote to allow us to go into long-term contracts. I'm sure you can imagine a lot of things have changed, especially in the last year and a half or 2 years. But for us, most of these changes are coming around curriculum. Once upon a time, you would buy a set of textbooks. They were paper, they would appear on a desk, and kind of that was it. Today, curriculum is not only a textbook, but also a digital portfolio of curriculum materials. And part of using those interactive tools, and it's everything from lessons to videos to practice to assessments, is an ongoing piece that you usually buy into for a long period of time. So in our case, we have looked at our math program, the next generation of our math program, and are looking at replacing that next year for grades K through 5. And they are looking for, or the norm is to buy into a 6-year contract, which is usually about the same amount of time you would keep a curriculum anyways before you went through the refresh. So on the next slide, if you look at that, so we're looking at a 6-year contract for about $215,000. So comparing that to what is now allowed, a 3-year contract, we would save $78,248 over 6 years. So state law requires town meeting to vote to allow us to go into longer term contracts, but the times have changed from the previous 3-year contract, where these digital pieces are integral to almost every piece of curriculum that we are looking at, and being able to get into long-term contracts saves the school department and the town as a whole a tremendous amount of money. So the other piece to know about this is that it would go through the normal procurement procedure, and that part of this is we would have to demonstrate that there was a long-term savings in order for us to even ask for this, and that anything over $25,000, any contract over $25,000 requires both my approval and the town manager's approval.
In Article 8, we are requesting that town meeting authorize the school committee to start a special education reserve fund. So special education costs are mandated, as you know, and they are difficult to predict. You may remember that last year in FY21, the budget was impacted by a sudden increase in out-of-district tuition, and the out-of-district tuitions can be large, the transportation costs can be significant, and they can fluctuate. So it's difficult to plan and budget for that. So the Townwide Budget Balancing Committee last year discussed options for handling this challenge. And this slide shows the full text of the state law, Chapter 40, Section 13E, which has to do with special education reserve funds. So the next slide brings out the key points. The state law allows towns to set up a reserve fund just for special education. It requires approval from town meeting in order to set up this fund. Then once the fund is set up, the school committee can allocate money to the fund from the school budget. The maximum amount allowed to accrue in the reserve fund is 2% of the net school spending, which is a number that's calculated by DESE. For Norwood, it would be approximately $1.1 million. So there are limits on how we would be able to spend the money out of this reserve. It's limited to unanticipated and unbudgeted special education costs, including out-of-district tuition and transportation. The fund would not be tapped unless the regular budgeted funds were insufficient. And there's extra guardrails put up around this. It's not just the school committee that needs to vote to expend this money. The Board of Selectmen would also have to vote to allow us to expend money from the reserve fund. We would have to demonstrate the unexpected cost. Obviously, we would need to protect student privacy. We would be careful about that, but we would need to demonstrate that there was some unforeseen cost, and we would then ask the Board of Selectmen to approve removing money from that fund. And ultimately, what we hope is that this, if we are able to set up and fund this reserve fund, then we would have less of a need in the future to come to town meeting to ask for free cash or other support to deal with unexpected special education expenses. So thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mrs. Budenhofer. These slides will be on the school website, and if you have questions, please reach out to any school committee member or myself, and we'll be more than happy to try to get you the answers ahead of town meeting. Thank you again for all of your support. Stay well and stay safe.
Thank you.